The woman at table 7 had been waiting 11 minutes, and she wanted everyone in the restaurant to know it. Lydia Holt saw her coming from across the floor, not walking exactly, advancing. The kind of advance that parts a room the same way a cold front moves through in October, slow and inevitable and not at all interested in what it displaces. The woman, mid-50s, cream blazer, hair set with the precision of someone who had never once let it air dry, stopped at the host stand and said, in a voice that carried to the pass, "I specifically requested the window table. I was told it would be available." Lydia set down the wine key she had been holding and walked over without hurrying. She had learned very early in her career that hurrying toward an upset guest only confirmed to them that they had successfully created an emergency. She hadn't yet. "Mrs. Drummond-Fay," Lydia said, using the full name from the reservation list because she had read every booking on her shift, as she did every shift. "I'm Lydia, the floor manager. I understand the host explained that table 3 became available, which has the same waterfront view and actually seats your party more comfortably. If you'd like to follow me, I can show you." The woman stared at her. "You're the floor manager," she repeated, the way people repeat things when they want to hear themselves finding them insufficient. "I am. You look 25. I'm 29, Lydia said. "The table's this way." The woman followed. She complained twice more on the walkover, once about the music being too ambient, once about ambient music in general. Lydia listened, redirected, and had the table resettled with a round of complimentary sparkling water and a bread service that technically wasn't on the menu on Mondays before Mrs. Drummond-Fay had time to locate her reading glasses. She was crossing back toward the pass when she heard it, a laugh. Specific. The kind that happens in the back of a conversation, in a group of men who assume they're not being overheard because the room is loud enough. She heard her own name, not all of it. Not in a way she could have proven, but enough. She heard Lydia, and she heard Bet, and she heard 3 weeks, and then the laugh again from a man in a gray blazer with his back half turned at the bar. She kept walking. She did not stop walking. But the words followed her to the pass, then through the kitchen door, then all the way to the stock shelf where she stood for 45 seconds with her hand on a case of sparkling water she didn't need, just to have something to hold. Aldercroft was not the kind of restaurant that appeared on lists. It appeared in the conversations of people who didn't need lists, which was a different and more durable kind of recognition. 30 seats, no printed menu, only what the kitchen decided that morning. A wine program that a national food magazine had described, 3 years running, as quietly devastating, and a dining room that looked, from the outside, like any other heritage building on the Halifax waterfront, which was entirely the point. Lydia Holt had been floor manager for 14 months. Before that, she had been lead server for 2 years, and before that she had come in through the side door with a hospitality certificate from a school no one at Aldercroft had heard of, and a reference from a diner in Truro where she had spent 4 years, learning that service wasn't about the food. She had earned the floor. She knew she had earned it the way you know things you were never told outright. In the way the head chef, a compact, precise man named Gordon, started calling her over to taste before service. In the way the owner, who had been in and out since before Lydia started, once told a visiting journalist that the front of house ran itself. In the way the difficult tables, the ones with dietary contradictions and emotional agendas, started landing in her section not by accident but by design. She had never been introduced to the man at the bar, but she knew who he was, Stellan Carew. He was 36 and he ran Meridian Hospitality Group out of Toronto, which owned 14 properties across the country, including 3 that had Michelin recognition, and 1 that had recently been shortlisted for a James Beard nomination, which technically didn't apply to Canada but which people mentioned anyway because it sounded like what it was. He had arrived 2 days ago, booked under a holding company name that the reservation system hadn't flagged, and which Lydia had only identified because she had looked up the credit card prefix when the booking came through, and she had had that habit since her 2nd year in the industry. She had not changed her behavior when she identified him. She had thought about it for approximately 4 seconds, and then she had decided that if he was there to evaluate the floor, the worst possible thing she could do was behave differently than she always did. So she had done her job. She had done it the way she always did. And now, apparently, she was the subject of something at the bar. The 45 seconds passed. Lydia put the sparkling water back on the shelf and went to check on table 7. The note arrived Tuesday morning. Paper, not email. Cream stock, Meridian letterhead embossed at the top. The address of the corporate office in Toronto underneath it, and below that, 3 lines in handwriting that was direct and slightly left-leaning. "I'd like your perspective on the new Dartmouth property. Thursday, 10 a.m., if you're available. The building is on Alderney Drive. S. Carew. Lydia read it twice. She sat on the kitchen table beside her coffee cup. She read it once more. Then she looked at her shift schedule on her phone, confirmed she had Thursday morning clear before her afternoon prep walk, and wrote back on a note card she found in the second kitchen drawer. She did not email because the note had not been an email. Thursday at 10 works. Lydia Holt. She did not mention the bar. Not yet. The Dartmouth property was a former textile building that had been sitting empty for 3 years while the city decided what to do with it, and Meridian quietly negotiated the lease. Lydia had heard it mentioned once in passing at an industry event and had forgotten about it the way you forget things that don't yet have a shape. It had a shape now, barely. The main floor was stripped to the original brick and the ceiling beams, and it smelled of old wood and something mineral underneath. Like the building had spent a century absorbing the harbor air and hadn't quite decided to let it go. Stellan Carew was standing near the east windows when she arrived, not at the entrance. He had the quality of someone who arrives before the agreed time and doesn't announce it. "You found it," he said. "The address was on the note," Lydia said. "I didn't need to find it so much as go to it." He turned. He looked at her with the same attention she had noticed at the bar, the kind that registers more than it appears to. "Fair," he said. "Thank you for coming. You invited me. Some people don't come when invited." "I go where I agree to go," Lydia said. "What did you want to see?" He gestured at the space and they walked. He explained the concept. A mid-format restaurant, 60 covers, focused on Atlantic sourcing, meant to operate without the formality of Aldercroft but with the same underlying commitment to precision. He wanted it to feel like somewhere you could eat twice in the same week, without feeling like you had dressed for it. Lydia listened. She asked questions. She disagreed, briefly but directly, about the bar placement he had sketched into the floor plan, because it would force servers to cross the main dining line twice per table, which compounded over a service into the kind of inefficiency that guests felt without being able to name it. Stellan looked at her for a moment. "You looked at the floor plan," he said. "You left it on the windowsill." "I left it on the windowsill facing down." "I read quickly," Lydia said. "The bar crosses the line. Put it on the north wall and you solve the problem and gain a sightline to the water." He was quiet for longer than he needed to be. "Where did you train?" he said finally. "A diner in Truro and then 4 years of paying attention." He looked out at the empty room. The harbor was visible through the east windows, gray-green and moving, the way Halifax Harbor always moved in November, like it hadn't made up its mind yet. "You see the room like someone who's had to defend every inch of it," he said. "When you start somewhere without connections," Lydia said, "you learn to justify your decisions in advance." He didn't answer right away. He looked at the north wall. He looked at the floor plan he retrieved from the windowsill. He looked at her. "I'll have someone draft the revision," he said. They walked for another 40 minutes. She made 4 more notes in her notebook. She had brought a notebook because the note had said perspective, not conversation, and he listened to each one with the quality of someone who was genuinely tracking what was said, not just waiting for his own turn. It was when they were standing near the far end of the room, where the original loading doors opened onto a small dock, that his phone rang. He looked at the screen. He didn't answer immediately. "Take it," Lydia said. "I'll look at the dock." She walked to the end of the room. She heard him answer, heard the low register of a conversation he didn't intend to be overheard, and she stood looking at the water until he came to stand beside her 2 minutes later. "I have to go," he said. "I know." "Thursday worked," he said, which was not quite a question. "You can send a proper brief if you want a proper assessment," Lydia said. "I'll put it in writing." He looked at her the way he had at the bar, that same attention, closer now. "I'll be in touch," he said. She walked to her car. She drove back over the bridge. She sat in the parking lot behind Aldercroft for 6 minutes before going inside, which was not something she would ever tell anyone, but which was the honest number. She found out about the bet on a Wednesday afternoon. Not the full version, not the original. She found out the way you find out things at Aldercroft, which was through the narrow channel between the pastry station and the dry goods shelf, where sound traveled with the fidelity of a very good recording. 2 of the servers, young and not yet careful, were talking about something that had started at the bar on Monday night. One of them said Stellan's name. The other said someone bet him, and then said Lydia, and then the first one said he said she wouldn't. And by then Lydia had heard enough to understand the shape of it without needing the specific words. She poured a cup of coffee from the press on the counter. She went back to the floor. She did not slam anything. She did not take a visible breath. She stood at the host's stand and she checked the evening's reservations with the focus of someone who has learned that visible composure, in a room full of people who are watching, is its own kind of statement. But the shape of it sat with her for the rest of the service like a stone in her pocket. Thursday's service ran long, which was not unusual for a Thursday in November when the university crowd pushed dinner into the late hours. By the time Lydia had walked the last table out and done her close with the kitchen, it was past 11. She was locking the cellar when her phone vibrated, a message, Stellan's name appearing because she had saved it when he texted to confirm the Thursday meeting. The brief is drafted. If you want to look at it before I send formally, I'm at the bar at the Garrison until midnight. She stared at the message for a moment. Then she typed, I'll come by for the brief. I have some questions about what I heard at the bar on Monday. 3 minutes passed. His reply, I was wondering when you'd bring that up. She typed back, now apparently. The Garrison was a hotel bar, warm and low-lit, the kind of place that understood that good lighting was a form of hospitality. Stellan was at a corner table, not the bar, with a glass of something amber and a folder that was clearly the brief. Lydia sat down across from him. She did not take the folder. Monday night, she said. At Aldercroft. I heard my name. I heard the word bet. I heard 3 weeks. She looked at him directly. Tell me what that is. He didn't look away. He didn't rearrange his expression. 2 colleagues from the Toronto office, he said. They were with me on Monday. They had a theory about how long it would take before you figured out who I was and changed how you acted, and the bet was about that. The bet was about that. Lydia waited. And you? She said. I told them it was a stupid thing to bet on. That's not an answer. No, he said. I know it isn't. He looked at his glass. I didn't take the bet. I also didn't shut it down the way I should have. And I should have told you when I came to Aldercroft that I was there from Meridian and that my colleagues had behaved badly. Why didn't you? Because the conversation at the bar happened after I had already spent 2 hours watching you run the most difficult Monday service I've seen in 3 years, he said. And I didn't know how to introduce a conversation about a bet that was already over, because it had become obvious within 20 minutes that you were exactly who you appeared to be, without the introduction itself being an insult. Lydia sat with that. It's still an insult, she said. I know. My name was used as a wager in a restaurant where I work. Yes, by people who had known me for 2 hours. Yes, the bar moved around them. Someone near the entrance was laughing. The amber in his glass caught the light and held it. I'm not someone's subject, Lydia said. Not loudly, not with the edges people sometimes put on things to make them sound more serious. She said it the way you say something that does not require volume to be true. Stellan looked at her. I know that, he said. I knew it at the bar and I didn't say enough. I'm telling you now because you asked and because you deserve the direct version and not the one that arrives through the pass in your kitchen. Lydia looked at the folder. Is the brief real? She said. Completely. Then give it to me. He slid the folder across the table. She opened it, pulled out the first page, and began to read. He watched her read in the same way he had watched her work, with the quality of someone paying attention to the thing itself, not to the performance of it. After 2 minutes, she looked up. You've got the kitchen entrance and the guest entrance on the same side, she said. That's going to create a bottleneck at peak service. He looked at the page she was holding. The architect thought the symmetry. The symmetry will cause problems every Friday and Saturday from May through October, Lydia said. I can tell you what to do about it, but I want to know who I'm telling it to. He looked at her. What does that mean? It means I want to understand what Thursday was, she said. What this is. Whether I am a professional contact or whether this is something else that I haven't been given the full information on. Stellan was quiet for a moment that had weight. I would like it to be both, he said. But I understand that requires more than what I've offered so far. Lydia set the page down. Then start with the honest version of Monday, she said, all of it. He did. It took 15 minutes and he didn't soften the parts that didn't reflect well on him, which was, she noted, not a minor thing. By midnight, the folder was covered in her notes, and neither of them had mentioned leaving. The fallout from the bet arrived in the way things arrive at small restaurants, sideways and all at once. By Friday afternoon, the story had circulated from the 2 servers through the line kitchen and back to the host stand, gathering detail with each pass in the way that stories do when the room is small enough that everyone is both audience and editor. Lydia walked into Saturday's service knowing that everyone in the building had a version of the story, none of which were hers. She did her job. She did it the same way she always did, which was, she had long since understood, the only available response to being looked at sideways. You could not argue your way out of gossip. You could only be exactly who you were until the gossip had nothing left to attach to. But it was a long Saturday. Sunday was her day off. She spent the morning at the farmer's market in Seaport and the early afternoon reading at the kitchen table with the radio on low. And she was doing exactly this at 2:15 when she heard a knock at her door that was not the kind of knock that apologizes for itself. She opened it. Stellan was standing in the small entryway with a paper bag from the bakery 2 streets over and the expression of someone who had rehearsed something and was reconsidering it. "You didn't text first," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes. To a text, to this." She looked at him for a moment. "Is that from Brightwell's?" she said, meaning the bakery bag. "Their last 2 cardamom buns," he said. "The woman behind the counter told me they were." "She says that to everyone," Lydia said. "Come in." She made coffee. He set the bag on the counter and stood in her kitchen with the slightly self-conscious quality of a person who understands that someone else's kitchen is its own kind of information. He looked at the radio. He looked at the cookbook she had open on the table. He looked at the window which looked out at the building next door's brick wall, close enough to touch if you opened the sash. "Not much of a view," he said. "I've had worse," Lydia said. She poured the coffee and brought both cups to the table. "What did you come to say?" He sat down. He picked up his cup and held it. "I spoke to my colleagues on Thursday night," he said, "after the bar. I told them the bet was not acceptable and that it wouldn't happen again." "That's the baseline," Lydia said. "I know. There's more." He looked at her. "The amount they had bet, I had it redirected to the Hospitality Scholarship Fund that Meridian runs for culinary and service students in Atlantic Canada. Matched it." Lydia looked at her cup. "You turned a bet about me into a scholarship," she said. "It felt like the right direction for the money. It was." She looked up. "But I still want to know what the bet actually was. You gave me Monday. You haven't given me the specifics." He looked at her steadily. "They bet that within 3 weeks you'd have done your research, realized who I was, and would have started treating me differently, performing rather than working." He paused. "Ryan, one of them, said that you were the kind of person who would impress him for 20 minutes and then adjust when the stakes became clear." Lydia was quiet. "And the other one?" "Devin said you wouldn't adjust, that you'd stay exactly the same no matter what, because you didn't have enough at stake to bother." "That's a strange way to win a compliment," Lydia said. "Devin doesn't know how to deliver a compliment," Stellan said. "He has other strengths." Lydia exhaled slowly. "Which side were you on?" "I wasn't on a side," he said. "I told them it wasn't a bet worth having." He looked at her. "What I thought privately was that you would stay exactly who you were. Not because you had nothing at stake, because you understood that changing was the actual risk." She looked at him. "That's the most accurate thing you've said." He didn't answer. He looked at the wall, at the window, at the brick of the building next door, visible and close. "You grew up without a good view," he said. "I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Dartmouth with a window that looked into the neighbor's kitchen," Lydia said. "I could tell you what they had for dinner 4 nights a week. And now? Now I work somewhere with floor-to-ceiling windows over the harbor, and I haven't stopped being impressed by it." She picked up her coffee. "You don't grow out of knowing that a view is something you earn. You just start to forget sometimes if you're not careful." Stellan was quiet for a moment. "I grew up with a view," he said. "I think about that more than I probably should." It was an unusual thing to say, and it landed in the kitchen the way unusual honest things land. Slightly off balance, but sticking. "Eat your bun," Lydia said. "They're better warm." The formal offer arrived Tuesday morning, this time by email from Meridian's Director of Development, a precise 2-paragraph message requesting a consulting engagement for the Dartmouth property, floor and service design, 14 weeks, with a fee attached that Lydia read 3 times before she was sure she had the decimal point in the right place. She forwarded it to no one. She sat with it for a day. Then she called the number at the bottom of the email and spoke to the director for 22 minutes, asked 6 specific questions, and at the end said she would have a response by Thursday. She sent the response Wednesday, yes, with 3 conditions: final approval on service design decisions within her scope, access to the kitchen team during development, and her name on the project documentation as lead service consultant. The director confirmed all 3 by noon. Lydia printed the email. She put it in the folder on her kitchen counter where she kept documents that mattered, and then she went to her afternoon shift at Aldercroft and ran the floor the way she always did, because the 2 things were not in conflict. They were, in fact, the same thing. She was at the host stand on Thursday evening when Stellan came in. He had a reservation. She had seen the name when she did her pre-service read, and he was shown to a 2-top by the window, which was not the table he had been given on his first visit. He didn't say anything about it. He ordered from the nightly menu, which changed, and when the server returned with the first course, he was looking out at the water rather than at his phone, which Lydia noted from across the room the same way she noted most things, without making a production of noticing. At the end of service, when the room had emptied and the kitchen was cycling down, she came to the two-top with a glass of water for herself and stood at the edge of the table. "You came for dinner," she said. "I came for dinner," he said. "Not to evaluate, not this time." She sat down across from him. The table was clear, just the candle still burning in its small glass. "I accepted the contract," she said. "I know, Vivienne told me." He looked at her. "I'm glad. I have conditions. I read them. They're not negotiable. They weren't presented as negotiable," he said. "That's part of why I'm glad." The candle moved slightly, catching a current from somewhere. "I want to ask you something," Lydia said. "Ask what you said on Sunday about growing up with a view and thinking about it more than you should. What did you mean?" He was quiet for a moment. "My father started Meridian," he said. "First property in Toronto when I was 11. Second when I was 14. By the time I was in business school, he had 7. He looked at the candle. "I grew up in those hotels. I grew up understanding them from the ownership side, which is a particular kind of understanding. Very complete in some ways, very incomplete in others. What's missing from the ownership side? What it costs," he said simply. "Not the money. The other costs. The shift work and the difficult tables and the industry that assumes you can be replaced." He looked at her. "I didn't understand that until I started hiring people who had come up the way you did, and I realized I had been evaluating people against a standard I had never had to meet myself." Lydia sat with that. "That's an honest thing to say." "I'm working on being more consistently honest," he said. "It's slower progress than I'd like. Most worthwhile things are," she said. The kitchen door closed. Somewhere a buspan settled. The harbor outside the windows was dark and moving. "My colleagues," he said, "Ryan and Devon, they were wrong about the bet in 2 different directions. Ryan thought you'd adjust to the audience. Devon thought you had nothing to lose. Neither of them understood that you were doing the thing you do because it's simply who you are." "People usually don't understand that," Lydia said. "I did," he said. "From the lobby. That first Monday." She looked at him. "The candle holder on table 7, she said, because she had wondered. "I saw you look at it when I was handling Mrs. Drummond Fay, after the whole thing was done and she was settled. You looked at the candle and not at me. I was trying not to make it obvious that I was watching." "You were obvious," she said. "You're better at a lot of things than you are at not being obvious." Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, but the beginning of one that had decided it was permissible. "The bar is going on the north wall," he said. "I know," she said. "It always was." The weeks that followed had the quality of a Halifax November, transitioning into December. Cold but not bitter, the gray sky above the harbor doing what it did, which was exactly what it had always done, and the city going about the business of being a city without requiring anyone's commentary on the process. Lydia worked her shifts at Aldercroft and drove across the bridge twice a week to the Dartmouth property. The space was beginning to have a shape now, not just a plan. She had walked every inch of it with the contractor and the kitchen designer, and once with Stellan, who stood at the north wall where the bar was now correctly placed and said nothing except that the sightline to the water was good. She knew the sightline to the water was good. She had told him it would be. Devon, the colleague, one of the 2 from the bar, came to Halifax in early December for a site review. He was shorter than she had expected from the idea of him and considerably more self-aware in person. He introduced himself and then said before she could respond, "I owe you an apology. The bar conversation was not appropriate, and I should have said that before now." Lydia looked at him. "Accepted," she said. "Do you want to see what we've done with the service flow?" He did. He was a quick study, which she appreciated, and he had the intelligence to ask questions instead of performing expertise he didn't have in her domain. At the end of the walkthrough, he said, "Stellan said you were the most competent floor manager he'd seen in 5 years of site visits." Lydia picked up her notebook. "Stellan should have said it to me directly." Devon blinked. "I'll tell him you said that." "Please," she said. "Stellan texted that evening." "Devon told me what you said," she replied. "Good. 3 minutes passed. You're right. I should have said it to you. I'll say it properly when I'm back in Halifax Friday." She put her phone down and went back to her dinner. He said it properly on Friday, not in the building and not over a table. He said it on the dock at the back of the Dartmouth property, where they had gone to look at the water after the late afternoon meeting with the contractor. Because the contractor had run long and it was already dark and the harbor lights were doing what harbor lights do in December. which was reflect off the black water with a clarity that justified the cold. "You're the most competent floor manager I've seen," he said. "Not in 5 years. Longer." I should have said that directly instead of delegating it to Devon. "Yes," she said. "I'm working on not delegating the things that should be said in person. It's good work to do," she said. He looked at the water. "Lydia," he said. She looked at him. "I'm going to say something directly," he said. "And if it's wrong, tell me directly. Always," she said. "I want to see where this goes," he said. "Not the property. Not the contract. This." He gestured at the space between them with the slight awkwardness of a person who is very precise about language and is aware that gesturing is not language. "I understand the professional complications, and I want you to know that if this doesn't go anywhere, none of it changes the contract or your name on the project or anything else. I want to be transparent about the fact that I'm aware of the power differential, and I think you should know that I know." Lydia stood looking at him. "That was very carefully constructed," she said. "I practiced it." "For how long?" "Since the bakery," he said. She looked at the water for a moment. The lights from the bridge were moving across the surface in long, quiet lines. "I know about the power differential," she said. "I've been aware of it since I looked up the credit card prefix on your reservation and found out who you were." He looked at her. "You knew before Thursday." "I knew before Monday was done," she said. "And you didn't change anything?" "No, why?" "Because changing would have been the mistake," she said. "If you were there to evaluate the floor and I performed for you instead of working, I would have failed an evaluation that mattered more than the one you were conducting." He was quiet. "What evaluation?" "The one I do every service," she said. "Whether I can look at myself straight at the end of a shift." The dock was cold. Neither of them moved. "I want to see where it goes," Lydia said. "But I have conditions. Tell me, if anything involving my name or my professional standing comes up. At Meridian, with your colleagues, anywhere, I hear about it first, not through the pass, not from Devon." "Agreed. If something goes wrong between us, the contract stands. My name on the project stands." "That was already true," he said. "But agreed. And the bar stays on the north wall," she said. He looked at her. "The bar was always going on the north wall," he said. "I know," she said. "I just wanted to say it." He laughed. And it was the kind of laugh that doesn't prepare itself, the kind that comes because something is genuinely funny and the person laughing has briefly forgotten to manage it. It was a good laugh. It changed his face. She had suspected it would. The Dartmouth property opened in late March, on a Saturday morning that couldn't decide between rain and actual spring, and settled, eventually, on a pale and generous light that came off the water and made everything look like it had been waiting to be seen. 60 covers, bar on the north wall. The east windows opened to the dock, where the harbor was doing its thing without being asked. Lydia arrived in a coat she didn't need by noon and stood at the service entrance for a moment before going and looking at the building from outside with the same attention she had given it in November when it was empty brick and old air. Stellan found her there. "Assessing?" he said. "Looking," she said. He stood beside her. "The sightline's good," he said. "I know. You were right about the wall. I know." He looked at her sideways. "You could let me have one," he said. "One what?" "One correct observation that isn't one you already told me I would be correct about." She thought about it. "Your contractors are excellent," she said. "The finish work on the bar is better than the spec required. I'll tell them you said so." "Tell them directly," she said. "Don't send Devon." He laughed again. Same laugh. Inside, the kitchen was running its first real service, and through the window she could see Gordon, who had come over from Aldercroft to consult on the opening menu. Because she had asked him and he had said yes, because the project had enough integrity to justify it. Moving at the pass with the compact precision she recognized from 4 years of watching him work. Stellan's hand found hers briefly, a question rather than a statement. She didn't move away. She also didn't announce it. They stood there looking at the building for another moment, the harbor behind it gray-green and moving, the way it always moved, constant and entirely indifferent to the good things happening in front of it. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said. She looked at him. "Ryan," he said. "The other one. He came to me the week after I got back to Toronto and he said he was wrong about you. Not apologetic about the bet. Actually wrong. He said he thought you'd perform for the right audience and that he'd built his whole theory of people on that assumption and that you had dismantled it in a Monday service." Lydia considered this. "What did you say?" "I said I knew, and I said some people are who they are all the way through," he said. "Not because they don't notice the audience. Because they've decided the audience isn't the point." She looked at the harbor. "Your colleagues are going to have opinions," she said. "About this." "About me? Yes. And your board also? Yes. And you?" He looked at her. I have very clear opinions, he said. I'm prepared to hold them in front of anyone who asks. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Okay. The service door opened and someone from the kitchen leaned out and said the first table was seated and asking about the bar menu, and Lydia moved instinctively and then remembered this was not her floor and stopped. Stellan noticed. Go, he said, if you want. She looked at the door. She looked at the room through the glass. It's your opening, she said. You designed the floor, he said. Go. She went. She moved through the room with the ease of someone who has read every inch of it in advance, spoke to the table by the window, confirmed the bar menu with the server, checked in with Gordon at the pass, and was back at the entrance in 7 minutes. Stellan was watching from the edge of the room. The bar's working, she said. The bar was always going to work, he said. Say that again in October, she said. After a full summer service, he smiled. She let herself smile back. Outside, the harbor moved the way it always moved, and inside, the room did what a good room does on a good day. It held the people in it without making them feel held, and gave them the water and the light and the space between things and let them decide what to do with it. Because the best rooms, like the best people, don't require you to perform inside them. They only require you to show up and be exactly who you are. And some days that turns out to be more than enough.